Title: Boundaries of the Cosmos. Expanded story summary. The universe has expanded into the stars, with humanity colonizing distant worlds. But peace is short-lived. A new and terrifying force emerges from the dark corners of space. The Dark Enemy. An ancient, sentient, and self-aware entity that can manipulate minds, destroy technology, and bend reality itself. It is a force beyond comprehension, and its origins are lost in the depths of time. As the galaxy faces annihilation, a team of 10 extraordinary individuals is assembled. They are humanity's best and brightest: soldiers, scientists, tacticians, and renegades. Each of them brings something unique to the table, but they are all broken in their own way. Each has their own personal demons, failures, and fears, making them vulnerable to the very force they must fight. The journey is not just about defeating the external threat, but about facing the internal battles within each of them. The story becomes one of self-discovery, trust, sacrifice, and learning that victory comes not through force alone, but through emotional strength and unity. Main characters. 1. Captain Arya Hawk, the stoic leader. Background: Arya Hawk, captain of the Titus, has led countless missions, all of which she completed with impeccable precision. Her rise through the ranks came after the tragic loss of her family during an interplanetary war, and the emotional scars of that loss are carried in every decision she makes. She believes that emotional detachment and strict control are the only ways to protect herself and those under her command. Personality: strong, decisive, and calculating. Arya runs her crew with precision. Her ability to make split-second decisions in battle is unparalleled. However, she has built walls around herself, refusing to show weakness to anyone, including her crew. Underneath the professional exterior, she's deeply lonely, afraid that if she lets her guard down, she will lose the respect of her team. Internal conflict. Arya's deepest fear is losing control, not just of her crew, but of her emotions. The Dark Enemy manipulates her by exploiting the memory of her family's deaths. She sees them everywhere, ghosts that accuse her of abandoning them for the war. The internal pressure to always remain strong starts to break her, and she must face the reality that true leadership is not about control, but about vulnerability, trust, and letting others in. 2. Dr. Zane Cole, the genius scientist. Background: Zane was a rising star in the scientific community, responsible for breakthroughs in neural interfaces and AI that pushed the boundaries of human understanding. However, his ambition led him to cross ethical lines. He conducted forbidden experiments on human consciousness, causing irreversible harm to his subjects. After being disgraced, he became reclusive, but when the threat of the Dark Enemy arose, he was brought in for his expertise in neural networks and AI. Zane views the universe through the lens of pure logic. He tends to dismiss emotions as distractions. He is cold and pragmatic, always searching for the most efficient solution. His greatest asset is his mind, but his obsession with perfection often alienates him from others. Internal conflict. Zane is plagued by a deep sense of guilt for the lives he destroyed in his pursuit of scientific knowledge. The Dark Enemy targets his insecurities, making him question his own creations. He becomes obsessed with finding a way to shut down the enemies, mind-manipulating technology, even if it means sacrificing his own morality. He must learn that knowledge without empathy is hollow, and that his worth is not defined by his past mistakes. 3. Lexa Roy, the hardened soldier. Background: Lexa grew up in the war-torn colonies of the Outer Systems. She was trained in hand-to-hand combat, stealth, and guerrilla warfare from a young age. After losing her entire family in a raid, Lexa became an elite operative in a covert military unit. She has lived her life as a soldier, emotionless, efficient, and focused on the mission. Personality: tough, relentless, and emotionally closed off. Lexa's mindset is that the mission always comes first. She's incredibly skilled in combat, but her fear of emotional attachment has left her isolated. She believes that emotions make people weak, and thus, she denies them, even when faced with her own personal trauma. Internal conflict: Lexa's greatest fear is vulnerability, believing that allowing herself to feel anything will make her weak. The dark enemy exploits this by forcing her to relive the death of her family. Using visions to manipulate her sense of failure, she is forced to confront her grief, something she has buried for years. As the team faces these trials, Lexa learns that embracing her emotions does not make her weak, it makes her stronger, and that healing begins with letting herself mourn and trust others. 4. Galen Tyre, the rogue hacker. Background: once a prodigy in cybersecurity and hacking, Galen became notorious after exposing a government scandal that led to his imprisonment. Now, he's a fugitive, working for the resistance to combat corruption. But his reputation as a hacker remains controversial. He's a tech genius, capable of breaking through any firewall, and he's often seen as the team's wild card. Personality: quick-witted, sarcastic, and occasionally cynical, Galen's humor hides a deep emotional wound. He has little trust in authority figures, and his past has made him wary of forming connections. Despite his skills, he often works alone, believing that relying on others is a sign of weakness. Internal conflict: Galen's biggest fear is betrayal. He has been burned before by those he trusted. The dark enemy amplifies his paranoia, making him question everyone around him, including his teammates. As the enemy infiltrates his mind, he must confront the reality that his fear of trust is his greatest obstacle. His arc revolves around learning to place faith in others, realizing that betrayal is not inevitable. 5. Jace Vorn, the soldier seeking redemption. Background: Jace was once a celebrated war hero who led a squad on a critical mission. However, the mission ended in disaster, with Jace alone surviving the carnage. Struggling with guilt, he joined the Titus crew, determined to redeem himself by serving on the front lines once again. He's a loyal soldier, but his fear of failure often clouds his judgment. Personality: brave, noble, and self-sacrificing, Jace often pushes himself to the brink in an attempt to make up for the lives lost during that disastrous mission. He carries an unwavering sense of duty and honor, but his guilt is his greatest burden. Internal conflict: Jace's greatest fear is failure and guilt. The dark enemy uses his memories of his lost comrades to manipulate him, showing him their faces and accusing him of being responsible for their deaths. His inner struggle is a constant battle between wanting to atone for his past and realizing that redemption is not earned by punishing himself, but by accepting his humanity. Throughout the story, Jace must learn that failure is not something to be feared, but something to learn from and grow through. Story development: the psychological manipulation. As the Titus crew enters the heart of the galaxy where the dark enemy resides, they face a brutal series of mind games. Each character is confronted with their deepest fears, amplified by the enemy's psychic powers. The story transitions into a psychological battle as much as a physical one, with each character fighting to maintain their sanity. Arya is tormented by visions of her family, who accuse her of abandoning them in pursuit of her military career. The guilt weighs heavily on her, and she starts to question whether being a leader is worth the emotional cost. Her struggle is the battle between her desire for control and the realization that leadership comes with shared vulnerability. Zane begins to see his previous experiments come to life, with the people he experimented on now coming to him for answers. They demand justice and condemn him for his actions. The dark enemy's manipulation forces Zane to confront the ethical lines he has crossed, and whether his ambition has led to irreversible consequences. Lexa relives the brutal day of her family's death over and over, hearing their screams and watching them die. The enemy twists her grief into anger, forcing her to question her entire existence. Can she ever forgive herself for not being able to save them? Will she let that grief consume her or find a way to move forward? Galen starts hearing voices in his head, people from his past who betrayed him, accusing him of being complicit in their downfall. The voices turn into a constant hum of paranoia, and he must decide whether he can trust anyone, especially his team. The enemy tests his ability to work with others and forces him to acknowledge that his fear of betrayal has kept him isolated for far too long. Jace faces the ghosts of his fallen comrades, who accuse him of failing them. The dark enemy feeds his guilt, showing him their deaths again and again. Each failure weighs on him, but he must find a way to forgive himself, realizing that he cannot change the past, but he can change how he moves forward. Climax. The crew must enter the dark enemy's core, a massive structure floating in the heart of a dying star. They face constant attacks from the enemy's psychological projections. In the final battle, each crew member must confront their inner demons one last time before they can destroy the core. Arya faces her family one final time. She chooses to let go of her need for control and accepts that she is not perfect. The weight of her grief lifts, and she is able to fully embrace her crew, trusting them to help her make the right decisions. Zane must destroy his own creation, an AI he once believed could save humanity, but which has now become a key part of the dark enemy's power. To do this, he must sacrifice his attachment to his intellect and his need for perfection. Lexa confronts her grief and allows herself to mourn, realizing that her strength doesn't come from burying her emotions, but from facing them. She becomes the emotional anchor for the team, helping them push through the psychological chaos. Jace forgives himself for the deaths of his comrades. He learns that redemption isn't a destination, but a journey, and that the only way forward is through acceptance and growth. Conclusion. After a devastating final confrontation, the Titus crew succeeds in defeating the dark enemy. However, the victory comes at great cost. Arya sacrifices herself to allow the rest of the team to escape the collapsing core. As the crew returns home, they are forever changed, not just as warriors, but as individuals who have learned to face their inner darkness and embrace their humanity. Each character's arc concludes with a newfound sense of self-acceptance and understanding. Arya's leadership evolves into one built on trust and compassion. Zane embraces humility, recognizing the importance of ethical responsibility in science. Lexa finds peace with her past, and Jace learns that true redemption lies not in atonement, but in living a life of purpose. The universe may be vast, but the crew of the Titus now understands that the boundaries of the cosmos are not just physical, they are emotional and psychological. And in the end, it is their hearts and minds that will determine the fate of humanity.